Farmers Market.
Hi, Jeff. Welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, this is Stacy Miller. I'm the Executive Director of the Farmers Market Coalition, and I'm sitting here with Jeff Farbman of the Wallace Center for Sustainable Agriculture.
Hi.
And we're about to get ready here. This is the fourth in our Information Marketplace webinar series that we've offered this summer, and we are really delighted. We are completely at capacity of the number of people who registered for this, so we're really excited to have all of you join us. And we have a really outstanding trio of presenters for you today, and Chris Curtis, and all of them have a wealth of experience in asking questions that help grow their markets, not only for the benefits of the grow as a market. So as the farmers market industry expands and grows, as we try to meet the growing demand for local foods in our communities, it's really important that we ask, but to really look at ourselves sometimes with new perspective, and to ask questions about how we're fulfilling our mission. So Darlene is going to get started first, and then Bernie, and then Chris, and they're all going to address different parts of evaluation insofar as how their markets evaluate both supply, demand, and organizational capacity. But they're going to focus on, Bernie's going to talk a little bit more specifically about evaluating the customers. I'm going to talk about more evaluating supply through the farmers and through her experience with farmer surveys. And they're all going to introduce their organizations a little bit. And
okay, so this is Darlene Wolnik, and I am from marketumbrella.org in New Orleans. And we are each going to start a webinar down into sort of, if you will, supply, demand, and organization. Vendor, record keeping evaluation, customers, and organizational capacity. I'm going to handle organizational capacity, and because I know the depth and quality of information that Chris and Bernie have to share with you about the evaluations they do, I've kept mine pretty general about the why almost of record keeping and evaluation, and a couple of details. But feel free to type in questions or wait to the end of each. We're going to have a question and answer time at the end of when all three of us have finished for people. So marketumbrella.org has been around since 1995. We started as a project of Loyola University in New Orleans, and we started by opening open-air farmers market in 1995. Actually became our own 501c3 just last year. We actually are very new fiscally at 501c3. We run 2 weekly open-air markets. We used to run 4 weekly pre-Katrina, and we also had a fair trade holiday market for 3 September, and did what we call the White Boot Brigade, which is traveling seafood market. We have about 60 farmers and fishers post-Katrina that we work with. Many of those are seasonal. Our annual sales actually can be seen on one of my first handouts. If you see the file share, there's a report called Seed Report. Seed Report is our economic impact measurement tool that we just did the report, the survey look at our markets in late June, and we report about $3 million in annual sales at our markets. That report. We are, as I said, a 501c3. Our annual budget organizationally, the market budget is right around $200,000 to $250,000 a year. Organizationally, post-Katrina, we've been asked to take on projects, and we're actually about a $1.1 million. All the projects we work on, our full-time market staff, full-time, that are dedicated directly to that, and 7 other programs. Market rent organization, and our rent is not many years, although I think that probably will happen. So that's a little bit of background about marketumbrella.org. So let me go into the presentation, and like I said, I'm going to go relatively quickly because we've had these problems. And also,
Darlene, can I just ask you to speak right up into the mic? Your sound is pretty low.
Okay.
What is that website again, please?
So let me start with the slide number 1, record keeping. What we know is most markets do a pretty good job of keeping records on lots of different subjects. But the question is whether or not they use those records. Sometimes you've inherited certain types of records that your predecessor had, and you continue to file and manage those. The best way, I think, to think about records is to ask yourself where you spend the majority of your time on using that information that you are keeping records on. If you're not using that information, if it's not relevant any longer, you may want to think about maybe doing different kinds of records. And I think the main thing about records as well is how you use the information later on. So there's things like you'll need information for your annual reports, for grant reports, for your websites, for archives, and also for using for evaluation. So I think I've seen a lot of markets use record keepers. What I think works well is if people try to manage records in spreadsheets and series of spreadsheets if they can, so that you can combine information later on or draw graphs off that information. We at Mark and Umbrella have used the local university who's offered Excel courses for us to learn more about doing things like spreadsheets. And it's helped us enormously, individually for projects and also financially. Both staff have gone and done classes, and I think you can find those pretty available around there. As far as back office systems, it is certainly my experience. Everybody has their own, and I think that's great. You have to do what works for you, but I do think it's good to research what's already out there. There are simple systems for maintaining sales at market or rent that I think you could find, and that would reduce the amount of time it takes. I know it takes me an enormous amount of time to create a new back office help, whether in the market or in your region. So from record keeping, obvious the basics, we go to evaluation, measurement, evaluation, reporting, analysis, all meaning the same thing, which is, basically you're using your information and you're trying to figure something out about how you're doing. How are we doing? And I think that what we see, with the three presenters we are today, we're three relatively large market organizations, actually just about the same age organizations, although I think Chris is a couple years, Seattle's a couple years older than ours. But we all have have had a lot of years to do evaluation, a lot of larger organizations, but that doesn't mean evaluation is just for large markets. I think it's important that everybody think of measurement, evaluation for their markets, and looking at every situation as a way to evaluate your organization. Even simply, how are we doing questions at markets can help you in a great deal. You don't always want to do measurement just when you're busy. You don't always want to do the most complicated measurements. But I do think the most important thing as a field we can think about is how other sectors outside of markets will take the information we have. In other words, it's very nice to get anecdotal information from your vendors or from your shoppers, but there are a lot of very accepted survey techniques that markets should use and can use to help them make sure that when they're doing evaluation, it actually is going to be in the kind of funder or city official. I'll talk a little bit later about SEED, which is our economic impact. So I will see if I can explain that when we get to SEED. But obviously, record keeping and evaluation lead to more funding if you are ready for that. Because what you're going to want to do when you go looking for funding is to find somebody who is doing work that wants to learn what you're evaluating, what your information, or ways to invest their resources. So when you talk about evaluation, measurement, and record keeping, remember that it's useful to funders to make sure that you're having a shared question. And a good example of that is something like, increasing senior citizen visits to your market. That is a great way to do all three. To say, look, we'd love to do some funding, get some funding to have seating for senior citizens, market to come to the market. So that at market by doing something like maybe offering free coffee if someone has an AARP card, or if they come in the organization, just literally counting how many people come with the organization, that the senior center. That is measurement. That is saying we want to do something, and we counted to see how we did. So I think it's very, very useful to think of evaluation not as all these really complicated survey forms, which are very useful at the end of the year, but maybe just one question at a time at your market can also be the same. Maybe many of you have heard me talk about 4M before. It is something that we at Market Umbrella have come up with internally to evaluate our own projects and to keep track of how we're doing. So, and we use it as a way to say with each project, number one, does it fit in with the mission that we have today? The mission statement we have, does that project make sense for us to handle it? And then the question is, do we have the capacity to do that work? Or who will do it? Marketing is very much about the communication of it. Who needs to know about the project? And sensible at the end, because we're actually able to sit down and say, what did we just complete? Was it a success? Sometimes we do it in the middle of a project. We have worked for a few years on starting a mobile market, bit adrift on that subject. And so we ended up doing a strategy session with the 4Ms in the middle of it, with our advisors, with our staff, with some other organizations, and really recalibrating that idea for ourselves. And it's a very good way for us to just take a second and sit down and say, how are we doing on this? Is this the right thing still for us to be doing? And I think that's a very important piece. The last thing on that slide you can see is the conversation around market portraits. This is a new tool that we're creating. Some of you have been my guinea pigs on this, and more will be. And this is about us gathering information from markets throughout the country to see if we can find similarities and differences and different levels of capacity, so that we can start to understand where market strengths are these days, and what is it that we can show to policymakers that they could add, and where is the common knowledge shared between markets. So this is the kind of tool that Market Umbrella is creating, not just for ourselves, but for other organizations. What it leads us to is the big tools we've been working on for quite a few years now, which are these that you can see in front of you on the thing, the economic impact we call SEED, the social capital measurement, which we call NEED, and the nutritional capital measurement, FEED. And the capitals, to that subject, this is the kind of thing that other outside organizations and funders have the language they've started to use when it comes to markets.
Hello.
And that's the kind of thing that has allowed markets to really go after some pretty sophisticated partners and maybe to build some pretty big capacity. We started with this with economic impact back in 2002. And we simply wanted to measure how markets did as far as gathering sales. Unlike many of the markets in the country, we do not ask our vendors for a percentage of sales, so we didn't really feel we could ask them how much they were making. So we found a way to do, with using a university professor who was one of our main pollsters in New Orleans, to build an economic impact tool that would ask shoppers you hear more and more about in local economy work. And although back in 2002 it wasn't that accepted, but certainly today when we talk about these numbers, and you can see from our own SEED report, again the file share, how it comes out, it's a very powerful tool to show. And it's a very simple tool to use. It was built for markets, and all we did was take technology from other places and put it in there. Social capital need is really where a lot of our organizations are working in, because we're working to do things like add EBT or help Farmers Market Nutrition Program coupons. That is what the social capital tool need helps to figure out. And we're still in pilot stage. We've done a couple of field studies, Los Angeles, Brazil, New Orleans, and we are measuring basically how shoppers, neighbors, and vendors feel that their market extends social capital or trust. And feed will be a tool to measure what markets I think are very good at changing relationships to food, but that's very early in the pilot stage. And so these are big tools for funders and policymakers. My last slide is really the obvious, I could call this the obvious. Really, we organizationally, most markets out there, like I said, do a lot of record keeping, do some evaluation. But one of the areas that we ourselves should really be aware of these ideas is within our own organization, measuring our own success, looking at our job descriptions, making sure that our staff is being used correctly, that our mission still fits our organization, because we find a lot of times markets have stretched themselves dramatically and yet haven't changed some of the basic information or the job descriptions from the very beginning. This will help you, and the 4M strategy can actually help you look at that as well. So at the very end, I will be able to answer some questions about some of the who is it, Chris? Who's next?
Bernie.
Bernie's next. Okay.
Hi, everyone. Hope you're still all on the line. Sorry you had a little problem getting into this. I'm a little confused with technology myself, but welcome. I'm Bernie Prince. I'm 97. On a very good day, we'll have between 4,000 and 5,000 people come to that market in a 4-hour period. The mission of our markets is to build and strengthen the local food movement, and we want farmers to be successful in our areas. We are set up as it's about a 200-mile radius around the District of Columbia that we draw our farmers from. We're all about local food. There is no resale allowed at our markets. These are the kind of data that I can tell you about our markets. We started our DuPont market in 1997. It became a year-round market in 2003. The first year of our market, we had 15 farmers and producers, July through November. Last year, we had 40 producers in that market. That included 2 bakers. Our sales were a little bit over $4 million, and that was a year-round market. We currently operate 8 farmers markets, 4 in Washington, D.C., and 4 in the state of Maryland, which is really just across the road from D.C., so it's a very close-in area. Our farmers and producers last year amounted to 80. Our farmers were farming a little over 7,500 acres. We had 155 market days. That's because we had over 250,000 customers. Then we also do chef demos and have a market gleaning program where we donate food to local charities. In addition to our farmers markets, we also do a local school food program called Food Prints, and last year we had about 200 children involved in that program, from our edible garden to going on farm tours to having farmers and chefs come into the classroom. So, I got the counting at farmers markets. I'm going to give you just a lot of the basics because there are some very simple things that you can do to count up information at the market. Hello? Slides are flipping. How's that? I think the main thing that you need to think about is that there are some very simple measurements that you can do for your farmers markets, for all of the programs that you might do at market, making products, perhaps value-added products, bakers, watermen, those kinds of things, so that you can ask questions about the number of acres that they're farming, if they're growing organically, biodynamically, if they're using integrated pest management practices, how many acres they're farming, how many years they've been farming, what amount of their income comes from their farming operation, what amount comes from selling in direct markets, so that you get a bit of a profile and a picture of the kind of farmers and the farming in your region that you're supporting by your farmers markets. We find that very important to use in a number of venues, not just the foundation funders, but also to our community supporters in the neighborhoods where we bring our farmers markets. So that we can actually track customers at market. We keep track of the weather. We keep track of the kind of products that come to market. So the first tomatoes, strawberries, cherries. And actually we've used that product information to be able to develop a product sheet about what's in season in our region. And that's based on 12 years of experience with seeing when farmers bring the first, peas or lettuce or field tomatoes, peaches, those kinds of things, and tracking what the season are for those products. It's a great handout to have for your customers at market. Is something that can be included on your website. we count customers in the market by doing it on the half hour. Now, some of our smaller markets, we actually count every single person that comes in the market. But you can find these little counters at Staples or Office Depot and walk through just like they do in the museum, counting every person that comes into the market. Most markets aren't so fortunate to have discrete entry and exit. And so, like many of our markets, they have multiple ways that people can get into the market. So we count on the half hour. We may double count some people, we may miss some people, but we think that system is a fairly accurate depiction of how many people are coming to market on a regular basis. And we track that, so we can use that information year to year to see if we're growing the market, if there are certain times of the year when we're not seeing enough activity in the market. It's a way to get community partners involved to say, you wanted this market in your neighborhood, we need some help out there, maybe distributing more postcards, posters, that kind of thing. We track the gleaning at market, and our gleaning is that we have farmers donate at the end of market fresh produce that they would normally not resell at another market, either used to make meals that are then delivered to hungry and homeless or delivered to senior centers, or it's used in some food service training. So we're tracking those kinds of programs so that we can show how our markets are being an additional good neighbor to the communities that we serve. And we think it's another way of giving back to the communities in addition to providing fresh local food. We also track our chef demos. Almost every market has a series of chef demos that we do. We like to track and see what kinds of chefs are coming to market, what kinds of things they're doing, how they're showcasing the local food. It's just another way to show our program activity. We do track our media because we cultivate the media a lot. We want them to tell stories about the farmers, about why local food is important, why supporting the local farm economy is important. So we track all those kinds of numbers every year. We have a regular weekly email that I actually write and send out. We've been doing that since 1998. We have about 5,000 subscribers, and it goes out to about 5,000 or 8,000 more people because pieces of it are passed on by other organizations to that particular neighborhood where the market is located. So we like to track we like to track our activity on the web to see what parts of our website are being used. We have great farmer information on the website. That seems to be one of the most popular pages. We also have about 12 years of recipes from all the chefs that have done demos over the years. We've got great information about other programs and links to other organizations. Session here yesterday about should we be blogging or Twittering or Facebooking and all that kind of stuff. And some of those tools may work really well for you. When we started in 1997, all those tools were not available and they weren't free. So there's a lot of free stuff out there that you can do, I think, to get people to be interested in your organization and to be able to track, who's coming to be involved in your organization. I think, they're pretty simple tools. A lot of tracking that we use is to be able to show both to our communities and our market supporters, whether they be nonprofit funders, foundations, or community organizations, how well we're doing with the markets. We do charge farmers a percentage of sales, and the sales are reported on an honor system. Actually, the first year of our market, we had farmers report their sales before they left the market. They didn't particularly like that, but that's the only thing we knew. So we charge 6% of sales. Farmers report by calling in or emailing to me, and then they pay their market fees the following week or at the end of the month. And again, it's an honor system. I think it's worked very well for us. There may be a bit of underreporting, but basically I think we've had a really good system with our farmers. We're at markets from setup to breakdown. We do have paid staff that are there at markets, but as founders, Ann Yonkers and I tend to be at each of the markets every week so that the farmers are aware that we're still very much involved with the organization. So I think, given my taking up too much time with my technology here, I'd rather just turn it over to Chris now, and she can tell you about surveying farmers and getting more information from the farmers. Thank you.
Okay. This is Chris Curtis, and it's loading some content, it looks like. And we're going to hope that these slides are not going to fly by us every 5 seconds. Right, Jeff?
We are going to hope that, yes.
Okay. I'll start with a brief introduction about my organization. I'm the director of the Neighborhood Farmers Market Alliance in Seattle, and we have 7 farmers markets. We started the first market in 1993 and have opened 6 more since then. The last market we opened was in 2007. We're organized as a 501c3. We have about 150 vendors. About 110 of those are farmers. The majority of them are farming on the western half of the state, but we do get farmers who drive in from the eastern half of our state. We saw last year in 2008 about 300,000 shoppers, and about the market's generated just over $7 million in sales to our farmers and our vendors. Our organization has a budget of about $575,000 annual budget. We have 5 full-time staff people. We have 4 part-time market managers and 4 part-time assistant managers and a part-time bookkeeper. We charge our farmers and vendors 6 or 7% of their gross sales, typically based on their location and the amount of real estate that they take up in the markets. So that's sort of a very brief overview of our Neighborhood Farmers Market Alliance. Every year we try to evaluate our supply, that's our farmers and our vendors. We try to figure out not only sort of just the bare bones questions that are just typical management questions, and that's the first slide in front of you. Well, the second slide will actually get the questions. I can tell you sort of just the way that we approach our vendors. We don't, all of our vendors, we make the reply optional. A few years ago, I became a little draconian, and I wanted to actually get their responses, and I wanted to actually require that they fill out the survey at the end of the season, or we wouldn't process their, application to sell. But my colleagues here in the office said that was way too demanding, and that we had to make it optional. So I agree. I think surveys should be optional. We typically have a 3-week turnaround reply date. That you don't want to wait too long. It gets lost on somebody's desk, and you don't want to make it too short. We've been incentivizing the responses. What we do is everyone who sends back a response, we put their name into a drawing, and at our annual vendor meeting, which we typically hold in the first quarter of the new year, we pull those names, 3 names, out of a hat, and those people get some significant stall fee rebates. I think in some cases we've got 2 days at the market and then 3 days in the market, and actually one person gets an entire season of their base fees rebated at the end of the season. So it's a very attractive incentive to get them to fill out the survey and come to the vendor meeting. We usually write a brief paragraph telling them why the survey is important. It not only tells us what we're doing right and what, and also what we might, could take some direction. But it also, I think you need to tell your supply, your vendors, your constituents, that this type of planning is important to the future of the organization and the future of the farmers markets. So we'll go to the next slide. Obviously, the bare bones questions you'd be asking, and I assume most of you ask this, is you obviously need to find out how many farmers and vendors are going to be returning for the new season. Obviously, you want to see obviously need to continue to assess, are your farmers going to even be there, and is the day of the week still okay, and are the hours of the market still okay? And also something that's come up this year in a more significant way is that we always ask vendors to supply a list of their product mix. This year, however, it's kind of come back to haunt us because some products are really, really overrepresented on the farm tables, and it's becoming more controversial, and we may have to evaluate product mix next year. And that's not just how many farmers, bring in corn and strawberries. That's actually looking at the total inventory on their farm tables and perhaps managing that. And I'd love to hear from any of you on this webinar call about, do any of you have to do that? Do any of you have to literally manage the inventory that's on the individual farm tables? So we'll go to the next slide. This is the bare bones end of the season survey. Nothing too startling here in these questions. We try to keep it purposefully short. What went well? These are open-ended questions. What didn't? What are the market organization's greatest weaknesses? What are our greatest strengths? 3, our upcoming season. I believe that, I think if I go to I'm going to go back to that one. I think this last season in 2008, out of about 150 surveys sent out, we heard from 37 vendors. I'd hope for more, but you can learn something from that. They were open-ended, and people who sit down, the 37 people who sat down and took the time to do to fill out the responses, were thoughtful and honest, and we do learn a lot from their assessment. In 2007, we did a much more in-depth evaluation of our organization through the eyes of the vendors. I felt it was necessary to learn more from them, and also, as Diane pointed out earlier, how do we spend our time here at the NFMA? There were serious issues ahead of us. We have location issues. These are the issues that we wanted to take a good, long, hard look at. And obviously securing locations, becoming fully self-sustaining, reaching a broader customer base, finding ways to accommodate more vendors and more products, setting and maintaining standards and integrity, the increase in the number of markets, special events, outreach, vendor communications. Those were our issues. I think every organization here on the phone probably has their own issues. So we sent out a survey and tried to address all of these issues, and it was just a simple qualitative way of evaluating it. I mean, everyone's filled out a survey like this, not important, somewhat important, and attach points to that. This is an example of the way we asked that question. We had to add details, and obviously we got to skew the question the way that we wanted, because I wanted the farmers to understand the reality of the organization. Securing farmers markets locations for all 7 markets. So we talk about Seattle, open spaces becoming less available, more vulnerable. None of our 7 market locations are secure for the future. And then I take 3 markets will need to move within the next 1 to 3 years. Please circle a number that tells us how you feel about that issue. And ultimately, that issue became the number 1 priority with our vendors, and it also helped give us direction on how we should be spending our time. And it also actually ended up directing our budget for the next year, where we actually went out and have hired consultants here in Seattle to actually go out and help us secure our locations. So, I mean, these were important responses for us, and we learned a lot. The way we sort of couched that question to them, it said, even though the markets have gained a stronger, loyal customer base, only about 0.5% of total food dollars are spent at farmers markets. If we want to expand our shopper base, we will need to overcome negative perceptions that the markets are too expensive, have inconvenient hours, difficult parking, etc. And so how important is it to you that we try to expand our shopper base and overcome these perceptions? Well, you can see the way that this was written, that this was meant to sort of point them in the direction that we wanted to go, because this is what we were hearing from our shopper base. So your shopper surveys can definitely influence your vendor survey. The last, interestingly enough, but maybe not so interesting, is number 6, where it said that was their least important priority: become self-sustaining. And this is the way we sort of couched that question. We cannot cover all of our annual expenses without financial help from the Seattle Office of Economic Development, King County, the state of Washington, private donations, and hundreds of volunteer hours. Consequently, our larger markets continue to subsidize our smaller ones. How important is it to you that we become fully self-sustaining at all our markets? And that was the least important to them. Of course, one thing you want to say is that, they probably were thinking, well, if the organization wants to become fully self-sustaining, what's that going to mean to me as far as my vendor fees? Are they going to raise my fees? I mean, I'm sure that's what went through their minds. So they made it the least important. At this stage, and I meant to mention this earlier when I did the introduction, of that annual budget, that $575,000 that is our annual budget, about 75% of that is covered by vendor fees, but 25% of it is still subsidized through private grants and public grants and volunteer hours. So that was explained to them. So anyway, that's how they felt about it. We did ask them the bigger question too about increasing the number of farmers markets. And vendors, I wouldn't say that's an overwhelming majority, but yes, it is a majority, said that they felt that we should continue to go out and open new markets and provide more sales venues for them. We haven't done that, and we're sort of stuck in a place right now where we'll support for the short term and the long term. So that's and here's the last slide, I believe, and Jeff did a really, really nice job of formatting this for me. You can actually see the point totals of how the vendors responded, and the comments that they provided on that survey. So that's pretty much the entire slide show, and that was just some very, very specific examples of how we survey our vendors over the last couple of years. The attachments under File Share will give you more detail about the questions and the results. And I also threw in our this year's vendor application because we do assess quite a bit of vendor information on our application. So I'm done. That's the end of my presentation.
Questions, and if you were able to get into the Adobe room, feel free to type your questions. But I know several of you weren't, so I don't want to stop you from asking questions over the phone. So I don't know exactly how this is going to work, but ask away, and we'll wing it.
There is a question here for me asking, this is Chris Curtis from Fred Broughton, asking if there are any concerns from farmers about the percentage of sales. And that's a good question. We were sort of in the position of, we started out as very small, and we charged our farmers a base fee, very small tier hours, and that's something I would never, never, never recommend again to any farmers market organization. In year 3, we decided to go to the percentage rent, and there were other farmers markets in the state that were already charging that. It wasn't an unknown to farmers. The markets were doing well enough to where we actually heard nothing, no complaints, no concerns from any farmer when we went to the percentage rent for probably the last 6 years or so.
Okay, I've been muting people and then the pound key, the number sign key, to mute yourself and to unmute yourself. So.
And if I can interject something really quick, this is Stacy. I think I identified the problem with one of the links that was sent out. Those of you who are still waiting to get in the room, might be able to see some of the very end here.
Is it open to questions now?
Yeah, go ahead.
This is Kathleen Reed from 35 or so markets in California, Oregon, Northwest Hawaii, and on the East Coast. And I have a question regarding how to track, how to kind of what we're in, and they don't always. Sometimes they collect stall fees based on the number of, based on not a percentage, but just a certain amount from the vendors. And I think even in some cases they may try to get some of that data, but it's not required. And so I'm wondering if there are any of you have ideas on how to track different things. We want to know whether our efforts to improve the market for the vendors is actually helping. So I'm just wondering if anyone has ideas on other ways to do that. Maybe it's customer counts, maybe it's trying to determine how much customers are spending there. Any ideas on that?
Not going directly to vendors, which was why we developed Seed, because I think the percentage markets have obviously an excellent way to match track sales. And Seed was a way for flat fee markets like ours, or the markets that may have other issues, to figure out another way to look at community, which would talk about sales tax, but also use the multiplier effect to see what the farmers, use. So to answer some of those questions, customer counts are a very simple way to do it. I think customer counts are very.
I didn't hear the last thing you said. Customers from year to year and turnover. means that we don't necessarily have data from one year to the next. So that's another challenge.
Without having any data, and without actually requiring the market to sort of have a business
challenge with, and we're not actually running the markets. A lot of the cases, it's an outside association that is running the market. So, so there are different organizations running different markets, but we have one in Northern California that runs about 50 markets, and about, I think, 10 of our markets. Certainly, you know, in terms of, we want those to do as well as they can so that the organization can keep running them. Sometimes 8 to 10 vendors. So, you know, given that it's a fixed stall fee, even if we did increase the sales, it's not necessarily going to increase the income to the market association to manage the market, but it will be beneficial to the vendors. So, and I think also because due to the size of the markets and the stall fee system, with such a small amount of vendors, it is, you know, I think at times they may have to, you know, have some of the larger markets subsidize the smaller ones, as you were saying, you know, you need to do in Seattle.
Yes.
Hi, this is Bernie. I'd just like to add, unfortunately my presentation couldn't get through it, but one of the things we found very useful in our farmers markets this season is that we're doing dot surveys at our markets, and we're asking 4 to 6 questions at market to try and get some customer feedback on in a couple of minutes to answer it, and they all seem very happy to be asked those questions in a very anonymous kind of way. We've gotten some good volunteers to help out with something like that. So it's a very simple thing to kind of do at your markets. If you've got space to either put out easels or to hang up on fence a series of questions on poster board, and people just put a dot sticker on their answer. So we found that a very useful thing this year, especially in some of our markets where.
And for those of you who are interested in more dot survey information, if this wasn't referenced earlier, there are some great resources on the Farmers Market Coalition website, resource library, where there's a category set up for on that site, and I can type in the URL for that resource library.
Hi, this is Donna from Troy Neighborhood Markets in upstate New York. And I just want to say that when we started our first market, which was last year, it was a small neighborhood type of thing, and we wanted to know if we were hitting the right mark. So we actually did, about 2 weeks into the market, we did start surveying the customers because it was a new market. We wanted to make sure we were doing the right thing. Was it the right time of day? We were asking the customers rather than the farmers about, this guy is looking for more of this, more of that, with that. So we put the information back out right away to the vendors, so they could adjust what, if they could adjust what they were bringing to market on how percentage of corn or strawberries people are bringing. I have a real hard time with that because I really believe in a free market system. I think when you start trying to control how many dozen eggs somebody brings or how many ears of corn somebody brings, I think you know, that's what the customers do. The customers will tell you either based on quality, price, volume, whatever, what they're looking for. If somebody
The person who was speaking previously, can you continue where you were when you got interrupted there?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
That's better.
Hi, I had to dial back because I had a bunch of static there. Continue. I just was saying that's what I thought, you know. I think this, you know, it's great to survey things, but you also need to, like I said, to respond back to the vendor so they have an idea. It also helps us telling. It also it was just also good feedback because we actually heard from the people, their customers, that they liked what we were doing. Keep good job, but they also told us we want more vendors. They actually prompted us to go out there and look for more people. So we expanded our vendor base because they said, we want more of this, more of that. And that told me if that's what they wanted, then it gave me a good reason to go out and search for these vendors. So it's just, we were starting our very first market. And,
Hi.
Hi.
I'm curious, does anyone want to respond to that, the comment about surveying in terms of product mix, market system? I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Well, in the past, we have a board of directors, and we've got 4 farmers on our board, and they do advise on most policy issues regarding applications, vendor mix, product mix, whatever. This year in particular, without evaluating the product lists that were on each individual application, we saw gluts of crops, and it just came back to haunt us this year in ways it's never happened before. So, I mean, we've been doing this for 16 years. This year, there were too many strawberries on the tables. There is too much corn. It's and these are, senior farmers who are getting hit with competition that they've never had before. We've seen every year increases in sales and increases in shopper counts, and we certainly survey our shoppers all the time too. It's just that this year we got hit hard with duplication of product. So that's why I threw it back out to people. Believe me, there's nothing, I don't want to pursue inventory management to this extent, but I'm thinking we may have to. We may have to do it for new farmers coming into the system next year, and say, bring everything on your list, but don't bring strawberries.
I got to warn you, though, that's a slippery slope. I was a vendor at a pretty successful large market. I was on the board of directors of that market, and one of the things we had was, you can bring this, but you can't bring this. And one of the problems you do is you basically start putting vendors into little shoe boxes. Like, you are the strawberry person, you are the corn person, and God forbid you expand. Now, in an ideal world, everybody will have enough customers to support that farmer. But, as farmers are trying right now to struggle, and especially this year, I think this year is an anomaly compared to the past years. I mean, the economy is really, I think, slowing the markets down somewhat, especially in the harder, the poorer neighborhoods. So when you start saying we want farmers to be self-sustainable and diversified and this and that, but then you put everybody in a pigeonhole, I think that's you're going in 2 different directions. But with what you said about junior farmers or looking at new applications, one of the ideas that I presented to my board was, okay, you have like a point system where farmers, after so many years of being what I call a good citizen farmer, like you show up on time and you're a good farmer, you're a good active vendor. You're not just there to make a buck and then you take off and we never hear from you when we want you. We would, if you could put this way of assigning like I call it the brownie point system, to farmers that are established. And then when a new farmer comes in, after they've established themselves, after they get so many brownie points or whatever, then they can basically green light for anything they want. But I think when you start telling somebody, you are a vegetable grower, you can't bring strawberries. I think that's really tough, because what happens is eventually it blows up on you, because then they start talking about on the board, oh, so-and-so doesn't want this vendor because they have competition. It gets really, really tricky to try to separate this kind of thing. And like I said, that's why I think sometimes the economy and the actual free market economy, and let the customers determine which farmers will make it and which farmers won't.
Right.
Some farm, you know what? That's what I sent out an email to my customers. I said, look, my vendors, I should say. I said, even the grocery stores now, the large grocery chains, they're doing stuff, little stunts, little loss leader flyers, to promote, to try to get that little extra dollar, to get that extra customer in there. Mm-hmm. I said, why aren't farmers also taking up on that thing? I know that the farmers have been, they finally managed to be able to get a good dollar for their product, but they might have to take a step back and say, okay, well, I'll do a buy 10 get one free, or they can have to get creative in their own sales. I just don't think that because you're a farmer you automatically get a gold pass. I think you have to be also a business person and realize the economy is tight. What are you going to do to make somebody feel like they're getting a good deal? That's all.
No, those are you've made some really, really good points. Do you have sort of something you talked about, like a good citizen farmer, and do you just sort of evaluate that yourself, or is there some sort of way to quantify that?
Well, I'm going to be honest with you. That whole idea went to a subcommittee on a board, and nothing ever happens. And that's one reason why with a little market that I run, we don't have a board of directors. Sorry, but we found that our board of directors, for the past 5 years, there was no what I call progress. It was the same old, and it just got to the point where there were issues that constantly just got tabled. And this was one of the This was one issue that we had. We knew it was coming and knew it was looming, and nobody did anything progressive to try to stem that off. Mm-hmm. So as I said, it can be done. It's not an easy task because it does require somebody to sit there and say, keep track of the vendor. I said, let's keep it simple. It has to be quantitative. You can't say, well, we like this guy because he's always got a smile on. I mean, come on. Do they show up on a regular at every event when they say they're going to be there? Do they have? Do they show up at meetings? Mm-hmm. Do they participate? Anything that they do above and beyond the call of duty. Now, like I said, the original market that I was involved with, we had a board of directors, which is all volunteers, a combination of non-farmer vendors and citizens. It got increasingly difficult to get farmers to participate in the whole process because, I'm busy. Yeah, we're all busy. So, again, I think that, people that actually take an extra, time out of their schedule to help govern and create policy and really build a stronger market, they should get brownie points. I think that your individual, you guys have when I heard your budget, I was just like, oh, my God. We work at a budget that's so puny. It's not even funny.
How do you manage without a board, though? Who makes decisions and stuff like that? I mean, if you're going to decide whether or not there, with regards to vendor mix or product mix or something, who makes those decisions?
There are two of us, and we basically
just two of you.
Yeah, we basically have set it up so that and like I said, you have to understand these are tiny markets, and we're going into the neighborhood that has nothing.
Who does your publicity and things like that? Then
we do. We're a dynamic duo. I'll tell you right now. And my partner, she's taking on 90% of it right now because I live 50 miles away from where the markets live or where the markets are. She roped me in because she knows I know about vendors. I know I have the vendor connections.
How is she going to be able to do this though for very long?
Listen, I'm not saying it's sustainable at this point, but the point is when you're in a neighborhood and people are saying, geez, we don't have access to this, we don't. So the question is, do you wait for a bunch of people to volunteer their time to create a board to sit around and talk about it, or do you just do it? So our attitude was, okay, let's just do it, and then we'll find our way through it. And eventually, my feeling is that you will find people that see the value in what you've got going, and then we'll pull them, you can pull them in as resources. You can start looking for somebody that happens to be, hey, I happen to be a landscape architect, and I can help you redesign this market spot because there's community block money to redo this space. There's somebody that happens to be a really good web designer that says, I don't mind helping you out with your web design. Although, like I said, my partner basically she decided we wanted a website, so she started on her own. I'm not saying it's great, but it's a start. And like I said, it doesn't have to take 12 people every month to sit there and make a decision as to what this and that. And in terms of our vendors thing, again, we have a very successful Saturday market in this city, and I was a vendor there from the start, and I love that market. But it also got to a point where the locals really didn't. It was more of a regional market, and it was a very high-end market. And it's a beautiful market, but when your local people don't feel welcome there. The market's been around since 2000, and they still don't have EBT. When I was there in 2000, I pushed DBT.
But I'm not able to see who it is that's talking.
You can't see me because I'm not on the web because I can't get on the computer. It won't let me in. So, what I'm just saying is that.
Can I have your name?
Oh, I'm Donna. Sorry, and I don't mean to talk because this is really off topic, but because we were really talking more about the evaluation. And I'm saying surveys are great. Dot surveys, I love them because it gives me immediate feedback, and people sort of like playing with the dots too. So, but again, what I was trying to say before is that by surveying the customers, like when we first started the market, we wanted to know if we were hit. And I did it for like a total of 4 or 6 weeks in a row. And I obviously I wasn't getting the same people because they knew better. But I figured if not everybody shows up to the market on the first day or second day or whatever. So we spread it over time, and then at the end of this time period, I tallied all the results. And it told me we were on target. We wanted more of this, more fruit, more this, more that, and then it gave me an opportunity to seek out those vendors that help fill in the gaps. And in terms of time and things like that, again, the survey was helpful. It's not a gold charm, but it's better than shooting in the dark.
Thanks, Donna. And I don't mean at all to cut you off because everything that you're saying is.
Okay, and like I said, I think it was off topic, and I don't want to take up your phone time.
Well, we have a couple more minutes here. Are there any other questions for Chris, Bernie, or Darlene? Or do Chris, Bernie, and Darlene have any questions for the group?
Hi, this is Tatum. I'm calling from Pearl here in San Antonio, Texas. I don't necessarily have any questions, but I just wanted to thank everybody for the webinar, only because we're a new market and all this information is great. We've been open since May 16th, and to learn from markets that have been open since, the 90s or even early 2000, it's just really, really helpful. I think it goes back to the point of not necessarily having to reinvent the wheel, but use what other people, have either researched themselves and proves to work, in several markets. So I just thank you for everybody's feedback and knowledge.
Great. Well, we're actually about at our time limit here. I would like to put a little plug in. We're doing an evaluation right after that session. Those of you who are online right now will get a link when the meeting ends to take it's a couple question survey about this, and hopefully you can answer objectively irrespective of the technical difficulties. And those of you who are on the phone will get a link to take that survey later, and it would really help us improve. Clearly there were some technical glitches with this session, but we had a lot of you on, and I think there was a lot of great dialogue. So I want to thank everybody for participating. Are there any other questions just in the last couple minutes that we have here?
This is Kathleen again from Kaiser Permanente, and I'm wondering, is there any way that you could send out via email the contact information for the speakers and organizers so that those of us who couldn't get on the webinar can contact them with follow-up questions?
Are you three all okay with that? Chris, Bernie, Darlene?
Sure.
Yes.
Sure, I'd be happy to do that.
Thanks.
And I will send out a link to where this will be archived to everyone who had registered for the session. And at some point, all the PowerPoints and the downloads as well will be downloadable separately from the webinar, so that you won't necessarily have to watch the whole thing to get the handout. Well, I want to thank everyone for your time and your patience today, and we're going to close this session, and I hope everyone